to the Love Government. I'm Dennis Leary. We're doing a series of videos on sex signs. And now we're going to do the 22nd episode in this series. I've been talking about the handbook, the manual, the shorthand way of doing it, and there's 5 points, 5 different points where we're applying the theory that we've been talking about. And we start, each one of these is like a PowerPoint presentation, but using the hand. The hand is a sexual sign. And we're talking about the thumb now, what the thumb represents. It represents clitoral thinking, clitoral viewpoint, clitoral actions, because the thumb more or less resembles the clitoris, the head of the clitoris of the woman. And we've been talking about what that means. Clitoral sex and urethral sex kind of goes with it, but we talk about the clitoral sex system is directly for pleasure. That is opposed to or different than the vaginal system, which is for reproduction. So it's good to get clear between these two systems. So you can have clitoral sex without fearing pregnancy, and you can do it in a natural way. It's called clitoral sex. You're focusing on the clitoris, and remember, the man also has a clitoris. So it's the penis and the clitoris. And you're not going to then use the vagina for sex unless you use the method of withdrawal, but you have to be very clear and communicating and sure of yourself and under control. Or you can have sex during menstruation. Like the early part of menstruation, I wouldn't think you'd get pregnant, but then you have to put up with the blood. But so what? What's wrong with blood? We're filled with it. Scrape off a millimeter of our skin and it would be a bloody mess. So we have a blood fear that the love culture did not have. So if you can put up with the menstrual blood, you could have sex during that time. It's all natural. Then there's no barriers. You're not, you could be having vaginal sex, but there's a difference between clitoral and vaginal. Now, if something happens, like in our culture, it's just common, and the child is not wanted, then abortion is used. Now, abortion is a real problematic thing because it's a form of killing. I don't know how you can possibly get around that. Abortion is the killing of a life form. It's a killing thing. Now, nature herself kills in that sense, but it's mitigated. It's not a black and white world, so killing does have its part in the world. If you push that idea of not killing to an extreme, it becomes absurd. And you can't even live yourself, because you're going to kill a plant. Or by breathing, you're going to kill some insect or something, or some life forms. So you can push things to an absurdity that doesn't make sense. You can't do that. You have to mitigate the problem. So nature has a way of mitigating abortion. When she aborts, it's for a reason. It's a good reason. There's a defect there or something. Now, we probably have more abortion, that type of spontaneous abortion, than they had in the love culture because our society is so toxic. It in itself, our stressful lifestyle, our diets, even the way we think, can produce abnormalities. But nature does it, and she kills for if you want to call it killing, it's aborting. But to use abortion the way we do, simply because you don't want that life form in you, which may be perfectly healthy and good, it's potentially a person, and I'm for feminism, by this aspect of feminism, I cannot get my mind around that, how that is not a killing act, how it cannot be, it's obviously, to me, it's immoral, it's unethical to do that as a practice. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. Always there's a mitigation factor. If your modern methods of science show that you've got a monster on your hands through however it happened, then you can abort it, but then it's a reasonable action. But just to use abortion because you don't want the pregnancy, I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me, and I don't think it's ethical. So the love government, and I speak for the love government at this point, we would say no, avoid abortion. It's not in the long run, in the big picture, it's not a good action. Although there are cases where it could be used, but then that's an ethical problem that you have to address. So the handbook of the love culture is clitoral thinking. Clitoral thinking. When I think of the thumb, it's the first point. And it has to do with the clitoris as a sign embedded in nature, embedded in the woman, first of all, makes it woman-centered, and then it's natural. Clitoral sex would be natural, the way I'm trying to describe it. It's natural. And that is very beneficial. And unfortunately, in our society, it's kind of foreign to us. We don't get it. We don't get it. But it needs to be repeated and reiterated until we begin to get it. So we get it by practicing. We practice that type of thinking, and then, as I said, along with that type of thinking, clitoral, you separate clitoral from vaginal sex, and just to summarize that particular point, the love government is against artificial methods of birth control. It's for natural methods of birth control. And it's against abortion per se, because it's a killing, but there are exceptions and there are mitigations, because it's not a black and white world, but the tendency, the general principle is clear, at least to the love government is clear. Now I also want to mention birthing and childbearing in terms of the extremes, which is clinical on one side and clitoral on the other side, which means sexy, sexual. So if you see the two extremes, then you can shoot down the middle and see where the land lies. So if it's over clinical, if birthing is over clinical, it has real problems for the child and the mother. And let's face it, why are births taking place in hospitals, which are big clinics? Why is that? Because of fear, terror, and money, which are patriarchal propaganda machine at work. You go to the hospital because the insurance pays for it, and because you're afraid, or I'm afraid. But again, it can be worked out very nicely. I have my son, who's now 20, was born in a home with a midwife, and I was there, and I was the first one to catch him. When he came out, I caught him in my hands and then put him to his mother's breast. And then 5 minutes later, whatever, the umbilical cord was cut, and actually we saved the umbilical cord, roasted it, I guess, and ate the, not the umbilical, the what do you call it, the placenta of the umbilical cord. We ate it in order to, kind of get back to nature. Now, this is a horrifying idea to most people. They think it's gross, disgusting, because they've got that inside of themselves. They've got grossness and disgust inside of them with natural processes. So, clinical on one side, the way I was raised, I was born in a clinical situation, clinical, in a hospital. My mother lost her first child because of drugs that they gave in this case. I'm talking 73 years ago. In my big sister's case, 75 years ago, 74 years ago. She was stillborn because of the drugs. And I almost didn't live because of the drugs also that they used. That's clinicality. You can see why I'm suspicious of clinicality. Then when you're born, right, they got to spank you, bright lights, noises, put you on a cold scale, swab out your eyes with disinfectant, and then later on, if you're male, circumcise you, put you in a bassinet or separate you from your mother, and then you bring you periodically on a schedule so the mother can bottle feed you and learn how, and then take you home. You get the idea of what I mean by clinical, by mechanistic, by artificial? That's the way of life we have in our culture today. And it's anti-love. It's not clitoral. A lot of people don't even know the clitoris exists. But it's not natural. It's a whole different lifestyle. And then you go on, and then the sexual practices, and then the birthing, and then the child rearing, the nursing or lack of it, and then you get child rearing, and it's in a patriarchal. So what I'm trying to convey here is that there's a difference between clitoral thinking and clinical thinking, with critical thinking in the middle. This is terribly important because the project of the love government is to govern ourselves with love. That means knowing what's going on at the basic level. Now we're doing the handbook. The thumb stands for clitoral thinking. The clitoral thinking leads us to think about these practices of artificial birth control versus natural birth control, abortion, unwanted pregnancies, well, they go together, and then the birthing process, the child rearing process. These are critical matters to think about, because this is what is destroying our world, and it's going to result in either blowing ourselves up or becoming more and more of a prison camp. And it's things that all of us are doing regularly, over and over and over. And my contention, my belief, my conviction, my reason, my intuition, my connections, my experience, all tell me that these things are destructive. They're not sustainable. They're taking the broad way, as the old wisdom teaching said, it's the broad way to destruction. Suffering, death, agony, terror, with no exit, no escape hatch to some imaginary heaven. That's an illusion. We're stuck in this condition, situation, until we change it. And the love government is saying, now is the time to change it by looking at our thinking, looking at our hand as a handbook, and say, oh, this reminds me of something. Oh yeah, the hand is a sexual symbol. The thumb stands for the clitoris. The clitoris is a organ designed so directly and solely for pleasure. It's inside of the woman and in the man, but more complete in the woman. It leads one thing to another. It connects the dots, and then it makes a feeling. It makes action. It has results. It is able to restore the love culture as it was revealed to us 100,000 years ago in East Africa, by the Big Lake, with a common mother under this type of a flag. It all ties together, goes together, if we want it that way, if we choose it. So we're choosing here to operate governed by love, and you're invited to join us on this journey. Thank you for being with us for this portion of it. Love, love and always love.